Marco Codes! Hi folks, Marco here. It's finally time to turn our Java-based command line text viewer into a full-blown text editor. And even if you think you're not really interested in the whole topic of text editing, it's gonna be a pretty great episode. So let's go! Okay, so let's do a tiny recap. What we essentially did so far is write one Java class, a viewer.java class. And if you run that class with the JNA library on the class path, you can specify a text file, and then the file, hopefully, yes, it does. It still opens up, right? And then you can navigate through the file, move the cursor around. You could even page and whatnot. But now I'm frantically pressing keys, but nothing happens. And that's because we haven't implemented any of the text editing features just yet. And we need to change that. So back in IntelliJ IDEA. The culprit is the handle key method. The only key presses we so far implemented are Control Q to exit our text viewer, Control F to open up the find window, and then we can move the cursor around. There's going to be a couple of different keys we're going to map in a second, but as a default, what I would like to do is any key I press, I just want to call a insert character method. And it would be good to pass in the key as a variable. I could even cast it to a character, right? And then we're just going to create that method, right? Now, what is that method going to look like? There is a bit of complexity involved here, but let's start with a simple case. I want to insert a character into my file. What does that actually mean? Well, remember what we do is you read in our file into a list of strings, right? And I'm just going to quickly change that from an immutable list to a mutable array list. Meaning I need to find the right line here in this list of strings and then simply, insert the character, in the right position. So going back into my handle key method, or rather the insert character method, what I want to do is actually I'll delegate to a different method even. I'm going to call it insert character in row. And the row is going to be the cursor Y coordinate, that is my row. Then the position inside the row is going to be cursor X. And then I'm just going to pass in the key. Just going to quickly create that method. And after that's done, the only thing I'm going to do is I'm going to move the cursor right by 1. So I'm just going to call cursor XX++. Now, the insert character in row method. What could that look like? Well, we have our list, so we could simply get, the specific row. So that is the line I want to operate on. And by the way, I'm just going to call this row now, and this is the at position, right? So I want to insert a character inside a specific row at a specific position. I'm going to get the row here, and then what I'm going to do is I need to, edit the line. So I'm going to have an edited line variable, and we're going to do that in a second. And at the end of the day, the only thing that now needs to be done is, set that line into the list again. So I'm just going to call the same method here, essentially, content set row edited line. The only thing that's left to do is to edit the line, meaning to insert the character into a string. There's many ways to do that in Java, and on Stack Overflow, you find 1,000 posts of what is the most performant way. The simplest, maybe inefficient way is to use a string builder. So I'm just going to go a new string builder. I'm going to pass in my line. I'm going to call insert, right? I can actually specify my position, so at. I can specify my character. And then I'm just going to call toString again. That's it. That's how you, edit the string. And last but not least, what we could do is have some sort of validation in here, meaning if someone passes in an at which is less than 0 or an at which is greater than line length, then we could say for now, we're just going to say, well, then the person always wants to put something at the end of the line, so at equals line.length. That's it. Shall we try that out? All right, here we are again on the command line. And let's see, I'm going to choose the empty line here. Ooh, I got an exception. Exception thread, unsupported operation exception, immutable collections. That's right, I know what the problem is. Because let's go to our open file method. And what you can see here is we open a file, we say path equals path of file name, and then we use files.lines. we get, all the lines of the file and convert them to a stream2 list, which is unfortunately an immutable list. You saw me change the list early on to an array list. We need to do it here as well. So I'm going to call collectors to list. No, I'm going to call collectors to collection and then array list new. That should work. That should give me a new array list. Let's try that again. Here we go. Here is my editor. And then, yes, look at that. We can already, insert stuff into random lines. How very cool is that? So that kind of works. Now the question is, what happens if I step, towards the end of my file and try to write something here into a new line? Ooh, I get an exception, index out of bounds exception. Let's fix that. Right, I mentioned it before, there's one edge case we need to worry about, and that is if our cursor Y coordinate is at the end of the file, meaning it is at content.size, right? So after the last line of the content, then we cannot just, insert a character in a row, but first of all, we need to create a row. Meaning we need to call a method which is going to be called an insert row at, maybe something like that. Insert row at cursor Y. And then it would be cool if you could tell, already the content of the row. So for example, let's say an empty content, we just pass in an empty string, like so. I'm just going to create that method. And I should have called that at, for example, plus row content. The question being, again, how do we insert, a row into our list of strings? Well, simple. We're going to call content add. Surprisingly, we can put in an index and the content here, right? Like so. And again, what we could do is we could safeguard the whole thing saying if at is less than 0 or at is greater than content.size, then we actually don't want to do anything. And then, the person called the method with the wrong arguments, and we could worry about that, but for now let's just return so that no exception is being thrown. Let's try that out. Here we go again. Our file boots up, so to speak, and yes, look at that. We can even in the very last line of the file we can step down and start adding stuff here. By the way, there's a tiny bug now when I, move my cursor position down and, start writing. The cursor is at the right side of the file, and then the new content is being added to the left of the file. Think about it, why that is, and please submit a pull request or a patch. It's a simple fix. Maybe you want to have a look at that. Okay, so we can type, random characters. The problem is when I hit enter, for example, something weird happens to my line. And, content gets deleted and then the cursor just moves and, it doesn't really, do what enter is supposed to do. That is going to be next. Meaning what we want to do in here is we want to handle the enter key a bit differently. Let's put in a new else if branch, else if the key equals our enter key. Then we want to handle enter. The interesting thing is, what does handling enter actually mean? And for that, it helps to just quickly go back to our text viewer. If we're at the beginning, of a line, so cursor x equals 0 in this case, and we hit enter, what we want to do is we want to push down the content and we want to get, new empty lines inside here. If we're, somewhere inside a line, what actually happens is we want to, in this case, for example, we want to keep the vivamus tempus, whatever. And then if we hit enter after the comma, the enter should obviously stay, but then, the blank line and the sapien in dictum should move to the next line. So actually what we're going to do is when I say move to the next line, we need to insert a new line here and then, move this content to the next line and delete it from the current line. Bit confusing? Well, let's see what that looks like in code. Right, so as I said, if we're at the very beginning of a line, so if cursor x equals 0, then what we want to do is we want to insert a row, right? And we want to insert the row right where we are at the moment to push the content down. And again, so we're just going to reuse the method I created earlier, insert row at, and we're just going to create a new line by putting in an empty string. And then we want to increase our cursor y, so we're going to call cursor y ++. Again, let's check it out. Here we go again. Now, cursor x equals 0. I'm hitting enter. Yes, it already pushes the content down. How cool is that? That looks pretty good. Now let's think about what needs to happen, once we're inside a line and we hit enter, because at the moment nothing happens here. So if cursor x equals 0, then we insert a new empty row. Else we need to do something else. We need to insert another row. Remember, we want to now insert a row after where we currently are. So we're just going to go cursor y +1. The question is, what is the content going to be? For that, let's actually just quickly get our current row. So this is my row here, right? And then the content of the next line should actually be my current line, a substring, starting from cursor x, right? Then everything that's left to cursor x should be ignored, and then from cursor x to the right, should be moved to the next line. And then we need to reset the content of the current line, meaning we need to do a content set, cursor y. And what we're going to do is line substring 0, so only the left part, from 0 to cursor x. Confusing? Think about it for a second. And then last but not least, what you want to do is after you move the inserted new line, in any case what we can do is put cursor x to 0 again. So this is the very end. Let's see if this works. Ooh, I'm a bit scared now. So let's see. Pushing the line down still works. Let's try out. Yes, look at that. Even with the space, right? That's what we wanted to do, is we can now actually, push stuff down. That means our enter key is working as it's supposed to do. So we can enter, add text. We can, create new lines in here. Pretty damn cool. That means up next will be actually deleting characters. You know the drill by now. We need to fix our handle key method first. Meaning Control Q, enter, Control F. Let's have another else if clause in here. And let's, by the way, again, I'm such a big fan of copy and pasting. That's the only thing I can do. Let's, copy paste some code. Ooh, that was one bracket too much. Right, like so. And we're going to say, we're going to react on the del key. We're going to react on the backspace key. So multiple different ways of, deleting a key. And then there's also actually the Control H, which works in, most editors. And all of these three keys, what they should do is they should delete a character. So again, I'm just going to create that method. We're going to take a couple of precautions, meaning if, the cursor X is in the top left corner of our editor. So if cursor X equals 0 and then cursor Y equals 0, then what we want to do is for now, we want to, ignore the delete character call. Also, if cursor Y equals content size, so actually if we're, after the last line, where these not existing lines are where you can enter new lines, we also want to ignore the delete call, but because there's nothing to delete, in that position. Okay, so if cursor X equals 0 and here cursor Y equals content size, then we just return. That's good. Now, again, there's mainly two cases. The first case is if we're somewhere inside a line, right? So if cursor X greater than 0, then what we want to do is we want to delete a character from a row. And the interesting thing is, right, let me just write that out. So cursor Y, we need to pass in the row. We need to pass in the position. And as we want to delete the character that comes before our cursor, we're just going to say cursor X -1, like so. And then we're at the end of the day, again, cursor X, after the deletion, we say cursor X -, we want to move the cursor left. That's essentially what we need to do. Delete character from row. Row at, whoops, that was right. What is this method going to look like? The funny thing is, it looks very much like the insert character in row method. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to quickly copy and paste the code, and I need to move the methods into the right place later on. But let's have a look again at what that method did is we said, let's get the current line. If, the validation, so to speak, fails, then at equals line length. We're going to change that. We're just going to return in the deletion case if we get invalid parameters. And then we get the current line. And instead of calling insert, we're just going to call delete character at, right? That should be it. We modify the string. And then again, we set the string inside the list of strings. That should essentially work. Here we go. Right, I've said that plenty of times now. Now I'm just going to add a couple of new characters. And yeah, look at that. I can start deleting characters. Ooh, that looks pretty amazing. Now what happens at the beginning of a line? I'm, still pushing backspace, backspace, backspace. Nothing happens. That's because we haven't implemented that case yet, and because it's a bit different. Because somewhat similarly to hitting enter, what we now need to do is hitting backspace at the beginning of a line means actually merging the two lines, so the current line and the previous line together, and then deleting the current line, right? And actually what I want you to do is I want you to have a go at it, and I'll just paste in the solution here in a second. So play with it for a couple of minutes, see if you can make it work, then come back here and see what I came up with. Here we are again. So what happens is a measly 4 lines. Let me take you through them quickly. First of all, what we say is our current cursor X position should be the previous line length, so at the end of the previous line. Remember, we want to merge two lines together. So in this specific case here, what I want to do is I want to put my cursor X here after the line, right? Then I'm going to take the line I'm currently on, and with the content get cursor Y, and just append whatever content I have here in the previous row at my current cursor X position. That is my append string to row method. And the only thing it does is essentially, call content set. And then please have a look at these methods yourself. Play with them a bit. They're relatively easy to grasp after a while. And then I have the content on the previous line. So I can simply delete my current line and also decrease the cursor Y position, so move the cursor up by 1. Was that complex? Well, let's see if it works. Here we go. Now, let me try it here. Yes, that worked. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go backspace, 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 backspace. Look at that. I can actually, delete characters, merge with the previous line, add new lines again, put in my own stuff. Pretty damn cool. So now the only thing that's left, for it to be a full-blown text editor is saving functionality. Well, who would have guessed? We need to go back to our handle key method. Now, what we do is, let's say saving should work on Control S, right? And right now I'm a bit tired with the many mistakes. So we call editor save. And let me just quickly create that method. What should happen here? Well, editor save is rather simple because what we can do is, ignoring, by the way, any file encoding, so please don't write me hate mail for that, submit pull requests instead. I'm just going to call files.write. I want to write something to my current file. And then I actually just want to, write my list of strings, and thankfully enough, files.write accepts an iterable of lines. So this should actually work. And then I'm just going to, display a status message saying our file was saved successfully. And I think I wrote that wrong again, but whatever. Now, current file, where does current file come from? We're just going to create a new field because I don't think we're saving our file somewhere. And just going to the open file method, what you can see here is that we get the path, the user entered an argument, we convert it to a Java path, we say if files exist and we read in the file. Well, in any case, what we're going to do is we set current file to path. That's it. that should work. Now, the only thing that's left is, I think, surrounded with a try and catch. And if there was a problem saving the file, what I actually want to do is I want to set a status message saying there was a problem saving your file, plus the message of the exception. And then yes, for now, I can still print the stack trace during development, but that should essentially be it. Editor save is simply files write and setting a specific status message. Can you believe it? Well, let's try it out as always on the command line. I can't wait. Sumfile.txt. Well, I'm gonna put something here. This is a test. Will saving actually work? So now I'm gonna hit Control S. In the lower left corner, you can see file was saved successfully. So I'm just gonna quit. I'm gonna rerun the editor again. And yay, look at that. Here are my changes. Yes, saving actually works. Yes. Right. And actually, if you wanted to do that once more with a file which doesn't exist, so for example, this here, oh boy, I will have issues, opening that up again. But now you can, write something here, add a new line, blah, 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 like so. Save it, quit, rerun your viewer again. And here is your file, right? You can still, play with it, and the file was saved, the new file was created. Pretty damn cool. So with just a couple of lines of code, we actually turned our text viewer into a real text editor. All right, folks, that's it. Let me know what you think of this in the comments down below. And also let me know what you would like to see implemented next in our tiny, tiny text editor. Sayonara.